Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Horsham Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Ellis Brown and I will be chairing this committee meeting. I shall be supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor John Trollope, and the professional officers. Thank you for attending, and may I remind members of the public this is not a forum for the public to ask questions or challenge the points raised by the members during the debate or by officers. You must not engage with the members or call out during the meeting. If you have requested to speak when invited to do so, it's important that you keep to your allotted time. This will be monitored and I shall prompt you to conclude your comments as we approach the end of your allotted time. Your comments and discussion points must be relevant to the application the committee is considering. We're not expecting a We're not expecting a fire drill this evening, so should you hear the alarm, please make your way to the nearest fire exit located at the rear of the chamber, and then the assembly point is outside the Lind Cross Public House. May I also ask council members and members of the public to please switch off your mobile phones or other electronic devices to silent. And remember to turn on your microphones before you speak and turn them off when you have finished. When members are voting, please make sure your arm is also clearly raised so that we can accurately capture the vote. I also remind members on the committee you cannot vote on those applications that are within your ward. I remind everyone here this evening, please show respect to each other throughout the meeting, especially as this is being live streamed. Please refrain from any personal comments relating to the officers and members of the committee. This evening there will be two separate committee meetings, and this is the first, and another will commence at 1900 hours. Before we proceed, could the officers here this evening please introduce themselves, starting with the officers on my right.
I'm Guy Rest, the applications team leader.
Emma Parks, the head of development.
Thank you. I'm Felicity Thomas. I'm acting as your solicitor this evening.
Monica Balaj, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. Item number 1 is apologies for absence and notification of substitute members. Do we have any apologies for absence, and are there any substitutes?
We have received apologies from Councillor Peter Wanderborg, Councillor Nigel Emery and Councillor Jay Mercer.
Are there declarations of members' interests? No? Okay, thank you very much. Announcement from the Chair or the Chief Exec. There are none from the Chief Exec, but I have one item, which is agenda item 5, DC 251371, land west of Parsonsfield, Pickhurst Lane, Pulborough. This is in my ward and therefore I will not be able to vote, and the Vice Chair will chair this particular item. Item number 4, DC 240506, Pear Tree Farm, Furners Lane, Woodmancote. Please could the officer present the application to committee? Thank you.
Thank you. Prior to the presentation, members' attention is drawn to the addendum, which relates to the council's current need and supply position for gypsy and traveller pitches. The application relates to land at Pear Tree Farm, which is located off Furners Lane to the east of Henfield. This plan shows the application site and the relationship with Furners Lane, with the built-up area boundary of Henfield shown by the slick blue line on the left-hand side. There's a long planning history at the site, with this slide taken from the committee report and showing the most recent and relevant permissions. These permissions include 3 dwelling houses to the bottom left corner of the site and 8 gypsy pitches across the northern section. These 8 pitches were approved across 2 separate appeals. The application site is the 4 pitches in the bottom right corner, shown in colour. So in terms of the 8 pitches allowed at appeal, this was the first appeal decision for 3 pitches, and as part of this appeal decision, the inspector determined that Pear Tree Farm was not remote and that services were within convenient walking distance within Henfield, noting that Furners Lane was a public footpath. This appeal decision also found that there was no safety concerns in respect of pedestrian and vehicular traffic along Furners Lane. Apologies for the text. The second appeal decision for 5 pitches was more landscape-led, and as part of this decision, the inspector found that the pitches would be seen in the context of a developed site rather than the undeveloped countryside. The inspector also found that there was no evidence to demonstrate harm from the increased level of activity on the site and the cumulative impact of additional pitches. Given this appeal history, the application site is considered to be suitably located in relation to Henfield, with Berners Lane an acceptable route for walking and vehicles. In terms of landscape impact, this application site is also reasonably well enclosed and would be viewed alongside and in conjunction with existing surrounding development. The site is adjoined by ancient woodland, which is shown by the blue hatching, and the proposed layout allows for a 15-metre buffer between the pitches and the woodland. This is a photo showing the proposed developed area within the red circle, and the ancient woodland is the tree belt, sort of on the left-hand side of the photo. In terms of a layout, the elevations on the right show the proposed day rooms, and each pitch would benefit from a day room next to the caravan pitches. And again, the ancient woodland buffer is shown by the sort of green hatching on the right of the layout plan. The red sort of projecting line on the right-hand side is a drainage run which goes through the ancient woodland. And the council's ecologist has objected to this arrangement. It has since though been clarified that no digging would take place within the ancient woodland, with the drainage created by underground moulding equipment. This approach is considered sufficient to ensure no adverse impact on the ancient woodland and would overcome the objection from the council's ecologist. The scheme allows for new and retained planting across the site, and the visual and amenity impacts that are considered acceptable given the nature and pattern of surrounding development. Overall, the application will contribute towards the council's gypsy and traveller pitch supply, and in the absence of any harm, is recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the first speaker this evening, and that is Ben Kirk. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
We're all aware that traveller site applications can sometimes be controversial. In this instance, it's pleasing to see that both the planning officer, the head of planning and all consultees are fully supportive of the application. The applicants are agreeable to all of the suggested planning conditions. In contrast, only a single letter of objection has been received, in this instance from Henfield Parish Council. It comes as no surprise that despite traditional housing sites being allocated, no gypsy sites have been allocated for travellers within the neighbourhood plan. This council has a poor record of providing traveller sites, and there remains a substantial unmet need. The application was validated way back on the 29th of May 2024, that's some 23 months ago. The application is not retrospective, as you've seen from the slides. The applicant has been incredibly patient waiting for a decision and has gone to great lengths to work with the council to ensure that the proposed development would fit in well with a wider pattern of development along Berners Lane and the established development on site. The application proposal is for just 4 pitches and will continue to be well managed, consistent with the existing pitches on site. As per the officer's report, in the conclusion, the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year land supply for gypsy sites, and at present there remains an identified undersupply of available sites within the district. It's recognised that the proposal will go some way to addressing the identified need. Given the precedent set by the previous appeal decisions and permissions on the wider site, the principle of development of the site for an additional 4 pitches is considered acceptable and would not have an adverse amenity, highways or landscape impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Invite Councillor Josh Potts, who I can't see. Oh, you were hiding behind the screen. Sorry, Councillor. And you have 5 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. This application must be judged not simply as another traveller pitch application viewed in isolation, but in the full context of what Pear Tree Farm and Furness Lane have progressively become over time. Members will know there is a significant unmet need for gypsy and traveller accommodation across the district, I accept that entirely. But unmet need is not a blank cheque for continual intensification in the countryside. And in my view, the report materially underplays the scale and significance of the cumulative harms arising here. This is no longer a modest rural site. The report itself describes Pear Tree Farm as containing traveller pitches, chalet bungalows, tyre storage activity, shipping containers, storage buildings, hard standing and associated structures. Over time, the site has evolved into an increasingly intensive concentration of mixed residential, traveller and commercial style activity within the countryside. And critically, that cumulative evolution changes the planning balance. Because earlier appeal decisions established only that some traveller development could be acceptable here. They did not establish that cumulative intensification could continue indefinitely without eventually reaching a harmful tipping point. Yet what members are now being asked to consider is another layer of development added onto an already heavily consolidated countryside site, accessed via a constrained and unadopted rural lane. And I do not believe the report properly confronts the overall cumulative transformation that has occurred here. Instead, it largely analyses each component separately, pitches, landscaping, screening, traffic and structures, without truly grappling with what Pear Tree Farm and Furness Lane have now become as a place. Because planning harm is often cumulative. Individual permissions may each appear acceptable when viewed separately, but the lived reality for residents and users of Furness Lane is the cumulative effect of all these changes together. And that cumulative effect is now significant. Residents and the parish council have repeatedly raised concerns over large lorry movements, commercial traffic, deterioration of the lane, pressure on verges, impact on the public rights of way, and the steady erosion of the quiet rural character of Furness Lane. Those are not abstract objections, they are physical land use impacts and material planning considerations. And this proposal is not the only source of pressure on the lane. Members will also be aware of further permissions and proposals within the wider Furness Lane corridor. This includes Baxit Town, a site for 29 homes, which collectively contribute to increased activity, additional vehicle movements, and the gradual urbanisation of what was historically a very quiet rural lane. Now, I anticipate members may hear that West Sussex Highways raise no objection. There's no surprise there. But with respect, that is not determinative of the planning balance before us. A lack of highways objection does not mean there is no harm. It simply means the Highway Authority do not consider the impact severe enough in technical highway safety terms to justify refusal under the highways test within the MPPF. That is a far narrower exercise than the planning balance members must undertake tonight. Members will know they are fully entitled to consider the broader cumulative impacts arising from repeated intensification along the lane, including the loss of rural character, increased activity along an unadopted lane, pressure on infrastructure and the cumulative urbanising effect of development in the countryside. Because that urbanising effect is now obvious. Hard standing, vehicle activity, engineered accesses, storage uses, utility infrastructure, formalised plots, intensification of occupation. Piece by piece, permission by permission, the rural character of Furness Lane has been fundamentally altered. And this is where I believe the report contains an important weakness. Paragraph 6.24d, officers themselves reference national policy, that's the PPTS planning policy for travel and show people of 27D, and this warns against traveller sites becoming so heavily enclosed, engineered and domesticated that they appear visually and functionally separated from the surrounding countryside. But in my view, the report never properly confronts these cumulative implications of what Pear Tree Farm has now become. I accept the site is already enclosed and established to a degree, but that does not neutralise the concern identified within national policy. Could you bring your comments
to a close, please?
It intensifies it. The issue is no longer whether another pitch can physically fit onto the site. The issue is whether the resulting scale, intensity and cumulative character of development remains compatible with the countryside at all. In fact, the extensive enclosure, screening and engineered layout increasingly reinforce the impression of
Sorry,
a
Councillor.
visually separate and
Councillor, I
domesticated
did ask you to
enclosure.
conclude. You've had your 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chairman.
In terms of the cumulative impact, the proposal is clearly generating another 4 pitches on the site, which already has 8 pitches and 3 dwellings. The key issue is how we can demonstrate that the cumulative impact is causing unacceptable harm. I think in this case, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, based on this side, is fairly negligible. The site isn't open countryside, there's development around it, and the landscape isn't particularly sensitive in terms of its intrinsic character. There is development on it and surrounding it, and it's the same with vehicular activity. Furness Lane is a public right-of-way, a public footpath, used by walkers and cyclists and vehicles, and there's no evidence to show that vehicular activity is putting off pedestrians or cycling, and that was a key issue in one of the appeal decisions for the 5 pitches scheme, where the inspector basically found any increase in activity because of this site wouldn't be of such substance as to cause harm. In terms of like heavy vehicular movements, for this 4 pitch scheme, we have recommended conditions to prevent heavy goods vehicles from accessing the site and to prevent commercial activity. So there are proposed measures in place to ensure that it is domestic use only. Yes, the key issue is proving that cumulative impact causes harm, and in this case, I don't think we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now open this up to debate by the committee members. Councillor Vickers.
Excuse me, thank you, Chairman. Just an observation. The electricity pylon looks very close to that development site. Do you have any comment to make on that?
Yeah, the development itself is low-rise, single-storey, static caravans, so it wouldn't be at a height that would cause potential interference. And I think in terms of residential use, it's not that uncommon to have houses underneath pylons, basically.
Any other member wishing to speak? Yeah, Councillor Knoll, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Livingston.
Thank you, Chairman. This small area is now becoming severely overcrowded. Our committee tonight should note the previous 8 pitches were only permitted under appeal, as our previous committee meetings had decided to reject all the original applications for new pitches at this site. With the 3 houses already approved and built, this brings the total to 15 pitches and dwellings within a very small area. I'm not sure if the officer writing the report was anticipating refusal tonight, as 1.6 in our paper calls this an appeal site. I think that, I don't know if that's a mistake or have I just misread it. I know this site well and have watched it develop over the past few years. I don't recognise some of the descriptions of the site in front of us. When seen from Billsborough, one of the listed buildings some 150 metres away to the east, it appears an overcrowded site with very concentrated living arrangements. There have been multiple complaints from residents living in Furness Lane to the west, and the harm to the surrounding countryside is clearly visible when looked at on Google Earth. I recognise the HDPF requires many more permanent pitches over the next decade, but it doesn't say they should all be in the same site. In particular, I have concerns over the new drainage run, and I'm pleased to see that a trenchless technique is to be used to burrow under the ancient woodland which is very, very prominent to the east. The waste drainage now runs into the existing stream to the east. This stream itself flows into Cutler's Brook, which flows across North Woodmancote and then flows into the River Ada. Now, I don't know what contaminants are present in this drainage runoff from this concentration of sites, but any contamination can only result in more damage to our local environment. This site is effectively in open countryside, and the harm will be considerable by adding further sites. Our MPPF guidance says traveller sites in open countryside should be strictly limited, and I would suggest that these further 4 pitches are just too many for this already very crowded site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to pick up on the drainage concerns, the foul drainage involves package treatment plants, which essentially treats before dispersing into the stream, and that requires exemptions from the Environment Agency to make sure it's functioning as it should. So there should be no expectation that approving this would result in contaminants being discharged into the stream. In terms of the character concerns, I think the key issue is understanding that we've lost 2 appeals on the immediately adjoining sites for gypsy pitches, and differentiating the considerations on the screen now from the appeal decision for 5 pitches and how that relates to this application site for 4 pitches. The appeal inspector's already considered that the site isn't open countryside, it's surrounded by development rather than undeveloped countryside. So it's saying that why these 4 pitches are harmful, but the other 8 weren't. And that's what you need to quantify to be able to refuse this on landscape grounds, I think.
Thank you. I would contest the fact that it's highly developed around there. It's not. It's open countryside. I walk through it probably once a week. It is open countryside.
Thank you. I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Lambert. Councillor Livingston first.
Good evening. My query is in regards to the so-called unmet need. Now, looking at the addendum, which is on the 28th of April issued regarding this agenda item, and it says that 50 pitches are identified as being required, and we have 38 in total presently. What other sites in the district are currently being occupied by gypsies and travellers and are expected to remain in situ during that period of time? Can they not be added to this figure?
In short, no. You know, there are other sites, and following the comments raised at the last meeting, I did discuss this with Director of Place, and there was a lot of work done as part of the local plan on this matter. So I think that's a conversation outside of this committee. It's quite complex. It's not as simple as you perhaps might consider here. But the point is they don't have permission. They don't count as part of our need. Our need is as set out in the addendum, and that is the circumstance in which members need to consider when making the decision today. Thank you.
Come back on that. So these sites which are being occupied currently don't have permission. So are these people not just gaming the planning system by registering for other sites, and eventually they will go apply for planning permission on the sites they're currently residing on, and we'll end up with more than our requirements? Because I'm really puzzled about what our actual requirement is, to be honest.
As I said, it's not as simple as that. It's incredibly complex. It is not a matter to consider at committee today. What does or does not happen with those sites doesn't impact on the decision that you're making today, which must be made in the context of the most updated figures in the addendum. So I think it's incredible. It's not as simple as that. but we, you know, I don't want to be caught up on a matter that is essentially at this moment in time is not material to the decision that you're making. Thank you.
Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chairman. I notice we have an informative on here that the applicant has to get an Environment Agency permit in order to discharge to the stream. Can we not insist that that permit is in situ before permission is granted? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's secured under separate non-planning legislation. So we could change the wording of the informative to suggest that, but we wouldn't enforce it as part of the planning permission.
Councillor Franklin, yes, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Just need a bit of help and clarification of the situation regarding commercial activities, which we've heard are ongoing already at the site, but in the documentation at 13 and 14, or conditions 13 and 14, it refers to no industrial, commercial, business activity and no heavy goods vehicles exceeding 3.5 tonnes operating to or from the site. Could you just help us understand what those conditions mean in the context that we already have? Are they conditions to be applied to the site to eliminate commercial activities, or are they to stop incremental activities?
So those conditions would only relate to the application site itself, so only the site of the 4 pitches. So potentially only the coloured area on the bottom right of the side. It wouldn't prevent any activities elsewhere on the site which may be lawful.
Any other member wishing to comment on this application? No, therefore we will go to the vote. And the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. Therefore, all those in favour, please show. Okay. All those against? Any abstentions? No.
That is for the application 5, against the application 7, and 0 abstentions.
Therefore, the recommendation to approve has been failed. Thank you. And therefore, we need an alternative motion put forward on this particular item. Councillor Noel, yes.
For the motion to refuse this.
What's your motion, Councillor?
On the grounds of urban development.
Do you wish to add any further points to that? Not necessarily, but Councillor Clark. No, we're quite happy to proceed. There is no point of order on this, and that come up with some words, Councillor Noel, and then we can consider those for the vote. So you're just going to put forward a motion that says overdevelopment. Is that correct? All right, taking advice here, and thank you, Councillor Clark. If you want to work on this, I'll allow 5 minutes to come up with the bones of the motion. We've got the bones. We had the meat onto the bones. Sorry, apologies. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. May I consult, please,
Yes, you consult with the officers. But
with the officers or with my fellow committee
if
members?
you want to talk to Councillor Campbell, yeah. Councillor Campbell, Councillor Clark, apologies. You certainly can.
Thank you.
Just to let you know, councillors, you only have 30 seconds left. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Knoll, do you have your motion?
The motion is for refusal due to the cumulative impact as itemised in paragraphs 26 and, 26, 32, paragraphs 26, 32 and 33
Policies numbers.
Policies, no.
of the HDPF, which will produce unacceptable harm to the countryside.
Just for clarity, could you just read that again? Do you mean policies or paragraphs?
Policies 26, 32, 33.
I mean policies, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm getting conflicting advice here, so I think
Well,
it's
could you
policy.
just, so that members are clear on what they're voting, could you just read that out again, please?
Yes.
Paragraph 26, the PPT.
I'm moving for a refusal of this application due to the cumulative impact as itemised in policies 26,
32, 33.
32 and 33 of the HDPF and which will therefore produce unacceptable harm to the countryside.
So HDPF 2015, yeah.
Yes.
Paragraph 26.
Thank you. Okay. If you could turn your mic off, councillor. Your mic, if you could turn. Thank you. We'll come back to you in a moment when the opposition considered this.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. I think ultimately it's a decision for members to take, but I think we would struggle to defend such a reason, particularly given the context of the site as shown on this slide here. The inspector, to note, did consider the committee's decision of the 171374 decision to be unreasonable, though related to other matters. I think it's difficult to sustain any kind of harm to the countryside in the context. It's completely surrounded by development, and the comments previously raised by the inspector in terms of the other applications. But ultimately, I can give my advice, and it's your decision to make, councillors, and obviously that has been put forward as an alternative motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you still wish to proceed, councillor Knoll? Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Sorry, you would.
I was going to ask if the head of development could explain. The inspector made his comment in relation to 1713-1374, but since then you've had a lot of other sites developed. So the comments might have been relevant at the time, but why are they relevant now when you've had 1, 2, 3, at least 3 or 4 applications since then that have made it worse?
Well, there's two elements. There's a cumulative impact and there's the impact on the countryside. I think the comments the previous inspectors made in terms of the countryside are very relevant, where effectively they do not consider this as kind of an open countryside site. Is that right? Yeah. So I think we need to be very mindful, and obviously previous inspectors' decisions are a significant material consideration. So I think we have to understand the context of the site and how it relates to the countryside. And obviously you have to identify harm if you're refusing it. Cumulative impacts is difficult because, again, you have to identify the harm. Just because there's more development, how is that harmful? The previous inspector didn't consider it open countryside. This is completely surrounded by other development. So how does this cause harm to the countryside? when you're talking about the cumulative impact. So that's my view, Councillor Clark. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Noel's motion? I don't have a seconder for this motion. Okay, Councillor Clark. Thank you. All those in favour of the motion, please show. Okay, okay. All those against, please show. Any abstentions?
That is for the motion 7 against 5 and 0 abstentions.
Okay, therefore the motion has been carried. And the application has been refused. Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item number 5. I will be stepping away from the chair on this particular one and handing over to the vice chair, who will chair this particular item on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman, on a point of order, I will not be able to vote in this, but I will be able to express my opinion.
Absolutely, Councillor. You are entitled, as all councillors, ward members are entitled to, if it's in their ward, to speak on that particular item, but they are not entitled to vote.
Thank you, Chair. The next item is A5, land west of Parsons Field Stables, Pirkhurst Lane, Polborough, RH21DA. Please, could the officer present the application to committee?
This application relates to land off Pirkhurst Lane, approximately 600 metres north of Codmore Hill. The application site is shown by the red line, and for reference, Parsons Field Stable to the east is a separate site which benefits for planning permission for up to 5 caravan pitches. Planning permission was previously refused at the site for 2 static caravans and day rooms, 2 stable buildings, and associated landscaping. The development is shown in the current aerial photo and was refused due to landscape, ecology and water neutrality concerns, with these reasons set out in paragraph 6.2 of the report. So obviously the development taking place on the left, and on the right is Parsons Field Stables, which is an authorised site for up to 5 caravans. The current application is an amended proposal for 2 pitches and day rooms and 1 stable building, together with changes to landscaping across the site. So this slide identifies the location of the 2 static caravans, the 2 pitches, the day rooms, and the centrally located stable building. The slide also shows ancient woodland to the south within the sort of thick green line, and gates to the north of the site, which are within the blue circle. So these are the elevations of the day rooms on the left and the stable building on the right. And a photo looking across the site with the 2 entrance gates on the left, the central stable building and the static caravans visible beyond. So the key differences between the previously refused application and the current scheme are shown on these slides. So the refused scheme on the left, the now proposed scheme on the right. And the key differences include the removal of the American barn, kind of centrally on the left-hand side, a reduction in the area of hard standing, and the retained hard standing will become a porous surface to assist with surface water. There's also the removal of close bordered fencing along the left-hand boundary, and its replacement with post and rail fencing and new planting across the site. So these photos show some of the elements to be removed. So the left photo is some of the hard standing looking towards the American barn, and the close bordered fencing you can kind of see along the tree line, which will be removed and replaced with post and rail fencing. So the development will contribute to meeting the need for gypsy pitches across the district, and on balance, it is considered that the extent of changes proposed by this current application would overcome the previous landscape concerns, with conditions recommended to ensure that the scheme be implemented in accordance with the proposed plans within an appropriate time frame. In terms of the other previous reasons for refusal, the application is supported by an appraisal which confirms no adverse impacts on protected species or habitat, and water neutrality is no longer a reason to refuse the application. The previous application was not refused for any other reasons, and none have been identified as part of his current application. It is therefore recommended on balance that the planning permission be granted as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the first speaker, Claire Bartlett, to come speak for 3 minutes. And you need to turn on the microphone so that it shows red.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening on behalf of a neighbouring landowner. I'd like to begin by drawing your attention to an inaccuracy within the committee report. The report states that the boundary of the national park and a public right-of-way lie approximately 160 metres to the west of the site. This is not correct. Both are much closer at a distance of just 6 metres from the site boundary. This is an important point as it affects how the sensitivity of the site is understood, particularly given its setting alongside a nationally designated landscape. The report does not consider the proposal's impact on the national park setting at all, and the South Downs National Park Authority does not appear to have been consulted despite the statutory duty to have regard to the purposes of national parks. In relation to the planning merits, this is a retrospective application following enforcement action and a dismissed appeal. The site has already undergone significant change from its former open rural character, which the previous refusal noted had caused landscape harm. While the current proposal relies on mitigation measures to address that harm, there remains doubt as to whether they would be sufficient to overcome the earlier concerns and achieve appropriate integration within this sensitive rural setting. This is particularly the case given the site's proximity to ancient woodland and the South Downs National Park. While the need for traveller sites is acknowledged, that need does not override all other considerations. The tilted balance does not mean automatic approval, particularly where there are clear adverse impacts. It is also appropriate for members to consider whether determination of this application under Section 70C of the Town and Country Planning Act is justified in the circumstances. This is in substance a repeat retrospective application for development that is largely similar to that previously refused and which remains subject to an extant enforcement notice upheld at appeal. In those circumstances, members are entitled to consider whether it is appropriate to entertain a further application of this nature while the breach of planning control persists. In summary, there are significant concerns regarding the lack of consideration given to the effect of the scheme on the setting of the national park, the uncertainty surrounding the effectiveness of the proposed mitigation, and the resulting impact on the character and setting of this highly sensitive location. There is also a legitimate question as to whether the application should be determined at all under Section 70C, given the planning history and the extant enforcement notice upheld at appeal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I now invite the next speaker, Moya Foot, to also speak for 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chairman, Councillors. I'm here speaking to object to this application on behalf of the Toton Pithingdean Preservation Society. When making a planning decision, government policies dictate that planning authorities should take into account whether a retrospective application is an intentional unauthorised development. In this case, the planning inspector clearly stated that this was an intentional unauthorised development. This is a material consideration against granting permission, as it shows total disregard for the planning system. The inspector also said there was not an established access onto Pickhurst Lane at this point, and the farm gate erected a few months earlier after some hedge removal was a precursor to creating a wider access for this development. There is a pre-existing enforcement notice upheld at appeal. The council's statement refers to Burt's Farm, an agricultural smallholding opposite this site, as being an urban feature in the landscape. This has paddock land and grazing animals and no residential accommodation. Burt's recent application for a single-storey log cabin was refused at appeal. the council concluded it was not in a sustainable location. However, they are now telling us this site, just across the lane, is in a sustainable location. This is not a small development. There are 5 large buildings that look a lot bigger in reality than they do on the plan. They occupy land that was previously open pasture, adjoining open grazing land, ancient woodland, a public footpath, and in close proximity to the boundary, as we've heard, of the South Downs National Park. The character, quality, and tranquility of the local landscape has been ruined, and this is contrary to policies 223, 25, 26, 31, 32, and 33 of the HDPF. If the tilted balance were engaged due to the fact this is an intentional unauthorised development, this can also be used to justify refusal. It is of no benefit to the public at large, either social, economic, or environmental. The government advises the number of conditions attached to planning permissions should be kept to a minimum due to a shortage of enforcement officers. Overloading permissions with conditions that cannot be monitored renders them ineffective.
Can I ask
Finally,
that you
if this
start to bring your
application is
comments
refused,
to a
they will
close?
simply appeal the decision, suspending the enforcement notice. Finally, and this is important, the government has noted that these intentional unauthorised developments undermine confidence in the planning system. To allow this development to remain would simply encourage further unauthorised developments, ignoring the planning
Your time
rules
is complete
that are
now.
designed to protect our environment.
Thank you very much. Your time is complete. Can I invite the next speaker, Stephanie either Costin or Costin, to speak for 3 minutes?
Good evening, Chair and committee members. I would like to highlight 3 reasons that demonstrate the disingenuous nature of how the case officer has presented support for this planning application. Firstly, the map added to the agenda is not, and not shown already, is not an accurate reflection of the authorised development on the neighbouring site of Parsonsfield Stables. More than half of the buildings are missing and the boundary is incorrect. The land in between Parsonsfield Stables and this application is called Parsonsfield, and this plot has its own unauthorised access, and by labelling the neighbouring woodland to the west of Parsonsfield shows the whole area in a far more favourable light and hardly developed at all. Secondly, when permission was granted to extend Parsonsfield Stables, and it actually looked like the map, the inspector at that time, in an appraisal of the site, has been referred to in point 620 of this application, and I quote, "The development does not create any significant harm to the character and appearance or to the visual amenity of the surrounding area, and overall the extent of the vegetation surrounding the site comprises sufficient mitigation to screen the development." But that's because the inspector was looking at the whole site of mature hedging that has now been ripped out at the land west of Parsonsfield. So at that time, there was no development. So it's totally irrelevant to use that as a quote in support of this application, and it is at best misleading. Thirdly, reference to point 623, the case officer refers to the improved proposals as proportionate. But from what starting point? From an empty field with hedgerows intact on all 3 sides, then 5 buildings proposed are far from proportionate. Finally, I'd like to draw your attention to the unlawful nature of the access, as previously mentioned, onto this site from Pickhurst Lane. The appeal inspector for the enforcement notice EN 25/0071 paid particular attention to the legality of the access point. He concluded, due to no compelling evidence being offered by the appellants to the contrary, that the access is unauthorised, and in his opinion, to close it off is lawful in planning terms. And whilst this current application attempts to address some of the inspector's decisions to uphold the appeal, there is no new evidence with this application justifying the validity of the unauthorised access point as it is today from Pickhurst Lane.
Can I ask you to bring your comments to a close, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. And now our next speaker, Ben Kirk, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The application comes before you after a long and detailed process in which the applicant has worked extensively and constructively with the council to develop a scheme that's acceptable in planning terms and sensitive to its surroundings. The history is well known. A previous application was refused on 3 grounds: water neutrality, landscape impact and insufficient ecological information. Since then, the applicant has invested significantly in specialist technical work to address each of those issues comprehensively. You have before you a detailed drainage reports, a full ecological appraisal, arboricultural assessments and revised landscape proposals. The previous water neutrality objection is no longer a live issue. On landscape and ecology, the scheme has undergone major positive change. The most significant amendment is the removal of the large American barn to the west of the site and the extensive hard-standing and access track that previously ran along the western boundary near the national park. This was a key concern in the earlier refusal, and its removal represents a meaningful reduction in visual and physical impact. In its place, the proposal now includes substantial native planting along both the road frontage and the footpath to the west, designed to restore the rural character of the site, reinforce existing woodland edges and deliver long-term biodiversity enhancement. Both the council's landscape architect and ecology consultant now raised no objection in their formal comments. The applicant has also responded to arboricultural concerns by committing to trenchless installation of services and limiting works within route protection areas, again demonstrating a willingness to adapt the scheme to protect the site's natural assets. It's essential to consider this application in the wider policy context. Horsham District Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of gypsy and traveller pitches. This is not a marginal shortfall, it's a significant unmet need. National policy is clear: where a 5-year supply cannot be demonstrated, relevant policies are considered out of date and the tilted balance is engaged. In such circumstances, planning permissions should be granted unless the adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Here, the benefits are clear: 2 pitches contributing to an identified and pressing need, removal of unauthorised structures, ecological landscape enhancement and a scheme that your own officers now consider acceptable. The harms, by contrast, have been addressed through extensive revision, technical evidence and meaningful engagement with officers. For these reasons, I respectfully ask that members support the officer recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, we have Councillor Julie Markison of Polborough Parish Council, and you have 5 minutes.
I'm speaking on behalf of Polborough Parish Council, and we strongly object to this application. The original unauthorised development was deemed unsuitable for a number of reasons, including the impact on this very rural local area with increased noise, traffic, light pollution in a dark sky area, adverse landscaping, drainage problems, and the cumulative impact of a similar site next door. Not only was the development illegal, it was done without any respect or consideration for the local residents or the wildlife from the very beginning. It had been a site with open paddocks and hedgerows, so the close board fencing, hard standing, removal of trees and hedgerows had a huge adverse visual effect on the area. It wasn't a sympathetic beginning, and the tensions with the local people still remain. The new application is not so very different, and many of these issues are still there. It was an illegal development, no consideration given for the surrounding countryside, so it is entirely out of keeping with the area, and because so much damage has already been done, it will be very hard to put right, and some will be permanent. The root damage to the trees and hedgerows means that the replanting of the hedging and new type fencing is not straightforward and has a lot of conditions attached. There are concerns that all these will be properly adhered to. The area of hard standing to be removed is not that much, and there is still an issue over the gate to the north, extending over the boundary, and more information is needed over water and drainage. Having a similar site next door, which has also had an adverse effect on the rural area and the local residents, means that this type of development is now dominating. Apart from the unsuitability of the site and the damage caused by its illegality, the sequence of events indicates a successful subverting of the planning system. The temporary stop notice issued on the 28th of February 2025 was followed on the 3rd of March by a retrospective planning application, which was refused on the 6th of June. An enforcement notice was issued and the subsequent appeal dismissed, but a new planning application was submitted after the issue of the enforcement notice, but before the appeal hearing, which brings up again the Town and Country Act, Section 70C. This gives the local planning authority the power to decline to determine an application for planning permission where a pre-existing enforcement notice overlaps in subject matter with a subsequent planning application. This scenario seemed to fit into this category. The enforcement notice was issued on July 25th, and this application was submitted on August the 26th. The appeal against the enforcement notice was on October the 7th and refused. It seems the enforcement notice, it becomes worthless. It's no barrier or deterrent to this type of unauthorised development. And if it succeeds, it will no doubt be a tactic that will be used again. We feel it is within the power of Horsham District Council to break this cycle of events by refusing this application. We understand Horsham is under pressure to find enough gypsy and traveller sites to fulfil its quota, but it surely needs to happen in the right way. If this planning application goes through, it sends a direct message of encouragement for illegal development, followed by an enforcement notice, then retrospective planning applications. There are a large number of illegal sites already in existence, as mentioned by one of your councillors earlier, and this outcome must set a precedent that it has to happen in the correct way. We feel we will be facing this situation again in the Pulborough area, where we already have a number of legal sites, so we strongly urge Horsham District Council to address this issue now, to encourage development to take place in the right way through the proper planning protocol, and not to condone this method of working the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I ask the officers if they wish to respond to any of the points made by the speakers?
Thanks. I'll just pick up on a few points before passing over, but just to confirm that the boundary of the South Downs National Park is to the immediate west of the lane along the side of the application site. So this proposal would need to be considered on that basis. In that regard, it's perhaps worth noting that the scheme before you on the right-hand side is moving development away from that boundary and also proposes removal of close border fencing, replacement post and rail fencing and new landscaping. In terms of the Burt's Farm application, that was for a running house in the countryside location, which is a different policy framework to gypsy pitches. And essentially there's no overriding policy which restricts gypsy pitches being provided in the countryside, essentially because they're not going to be provided in built-up areas. So that Burt's Farm decision is of limited relevance to this gypsy application. And I'll pass over to
Thank you. Just quickly to pick up on a couple of the speakers mentioned Section 70C. There is a power that rests with local planning authorities to decline to determine applications, but unfortunately that power doesn't rest with planning committee, it rests with the director of place. So the committee are required to determine applications. I'm happy to pick up separately the process for decline to determine, but it's not relevant to your consideration today. Thank you.
Thank you. I now open this up to debate with councillor committee members.
Livingston.
Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. In connection with the hard standing, condition 2 talks about removal of the hard standing. I'm just wondering, bearing in mind what our drainage officer said, in that all the existing hard standing needs to be removed, whether condition 2 is actually strong enough or it needs a few alls in there. Be interested in the officer's comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the condition essentially gives 3 months for details for the hard standing to be removed, and then post approval of those details gives another 3 months for it to be carried out. So I think that's enforceable and is clear enough as to what's required. I guess the key question is whether you think 3 months is reasonable for submission and implementation, because it could be 6 months in total.
Yeah, I think the point I'm really concerned about is the hard standing underneath the existing dwellings on the site, whether that is actually included in this. Okay.
I think officers feel it's sufficient, but if you wish to add some wording, councillors, then of course that can be considered as an amendment to the condition.
Thank you. Now go to Councillor Livingston.
Thank you. I'm very concerned about this section 70C because this is an a deliberately intentional, unauthorised development and put in a retrospective planning application. Now, I know this is happening in a number of locations in my ward now. So what is the process to make sure that the Director of Place considers declining the applications?
Just briefly, Councillor Livingston, I recognise you haven't been party, but there have been quite significant conversations recently on that point, and I've got an essay I could send you. But ultimately, it's a separate matter. But I'm certainly happy to discuss with you outside of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Raise another point. 6.53 of the report, 6.52 and 6.53. This is in regard to BNG, biodiversity net gain. 6.53 states the application is retrospective in nature, and retrospective applications are exempt from mandatory biodiversity net gain requirements. Now, the preceding section talks about Schedule 7A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, as inserted by Schedule 14 of the Environment Act 2021, mandates that every development must achieve at least 10% biodiversity net gain, unless the development qualifies as exempt under the biodiversity gain requirements, in brackets, Exemptions Regulation 2024. Having checked these regulations, there is no mention of BNG being exempt. So we need this, in my opinion, corrected, that we have to have the requirements of BNG included in this application.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so basically, it's a fair point. BNG is essentially a pre-commencement condition attached to the permission. And where development's already taken place, they can't comply with the pre-commencement condition.
Just to add, the government know this is a loophole, and they're seeking to fill it. Not quick enough, in my view, but it has been an issue since BNG became in effect, and we have made our representations to government in this respect. But we are where we are right now in terms of this application, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Let's come back again, please.
One last time, yes.
Well, I think in the actual schedule, it does allow for estimating what the BNG should be from pre-requirements and then still imposing it, even though we've got to this position where we've got a built-out application already. So I think it's in, I'm trying to find it on my bit of paper here, but I think it's 6B, oh yeah. And then in clause 6B of the Schedule 7A mentions the biodiversity value of the on-site habitat immediately before the carrying on of the activities is to be taken to the highest biodiversity value of the on-site habitat, which is reasonably supported by any available evidence related to the on-site habitat. So I still think it should be included.
Yeah, so basically the view of officers is that it's BNG exempt, and our approach on this application is basically achieved through condition 7, which is trying to secure details of biodiversity enhancement. So we're not going through the BNG route, we're going through biodiversity enhancement by way of a condition. So it's not the case that we're ignoring the issue, we're just securing it through a different mechanism.
Thank you.
We're trying to get an increase in BNG by 10%, which is what the requirement is.
Okay.
To be clear, members, so the statutory BND condition is not one we impose, it's imposed through national legislation. That requires details to be pre-commencement. A retrospective application cannot apply to a pre-commencement condition because it's already happened. As I said, this is a recognised national issue. But instead of doing nothing, we've got a condition that requires enhancement, which may achieve the same thing, but not through the same framework because it's simply not possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I accept that.
Thank you. Moving on. Councillor Clark, apologies for the delay.
Thank you. And I was like, as normal, the ward member would start off first, so can come back at the end as well. So, if I may, I'm glad to see that the addendum on page 11 and 12 now clarifies the numbers properly, including the paper from Opinion Research Service dated 12th of the 7th, 2024. I did bring these points up at the previous meeting. In that document, there are 14 pitches which are identified as non-authorised developments. Why is enforcement not being taken on these sites? I heard what was said, but in my mathematical brain says that we're counting 14 pitches for our need that already exist. Ipso facto, they shouldn't be in our need. So the 50 that we're looking for is, in fact, we've already got 49, not the numbers that officers are talking about. Last time I would have proposed invoking Section 70C of the Planning Act, but of course we've discussed that, so I won't go through it again, but that is in the process of being looked at by officers to address that loophole. If we took action against the illegal sites, we wouldn't be looking at this application. Basically, an application that broke planning laws and has led to a carbuncle in the countryside. Now, the applicant has now looked to roll back on a large amount of the harm that's already done to a rural site. Oh, sorry, we did major damage. We will back off a bit and we'll look to buy acceptance despite breaking the rules. I have grave concerns over the number of gypsy and traveller sites in Pulborough and in this particular area of Codmore Hill, because there are quite a number. Also, basically, there isn't now consideration has been given or mentioned the South Downs National Park. And in fact, very little has been said about it. I also worry about the conditions. We normally have pre-commencement conditions, but in this case, it's retrospective. Now, we've had so many problems with pre-commencement conditions on the pitches next door that I question there's a history of non-compliance of pre-commencement conditions. So what hope have we got on post-commencement conditions? And I'm very unhappy, especially the drainage and sewage condition 13, for example, that it said we're going to follow the guidance that was provided in the paper to the committee or to the officers, but we have no way of knowing that that will work properly. Basically, the pre-commencement conditions next door have not been met up. So I think we should look very carefully at this site. And I would like also, depending on what is said after what I have said, to come back and make a counter proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the officers care to respond?
Just briefly, I'm not going to repeat what I said about the unauthorised sites and whether or not permission should be forthcoming or what happens, because that's not the position we're at in terms of decision making. And as I said, it's a lot more complex. Ultimately, members need to take a view and determine this application based on planning policy, and the tilted balance being in effect due to our 5-year supply, conditions are enforceable, and the council can take action. They have to meet the tests in order to impose them. Officers feel they meet the tests. So the fact that you may or may not feel that they're complied with it doesn't really substantiate a planning ground. You need to consider the merits, the material considerations of the application itself, and obviously that's what members need to do today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Chair. Section 6.28 of the report states that that there's likely to be there's unlikely to be a loss of amenity to local residents. Obviously, as a retrospective application, the site is there, and it's been possible to speak with local residents who have lived with this development next door to them. I mean, it says in the paragraph that the nearest property is some way from the site, which is not really true. It's they're practically on top of each other. The area of Pickhurst Lane is miles from Pulborough. It's miles from the built-up area boundary. Previously, it was a quiet settlement of a few houses. The effect of this retrospectively applied for development has been significant, and local residents say that this has included things, amongst other things, harm to the rural character and appearance of the area, impacts on highway safety and increased traffic. There's been impacts with lighting. So, as I said, those who I've spoken to have been hugely effective, and despite what the report says, have suffered huge amenity impact. I'm not able to vote on this application, but I hope other members of the committee will take into account what they have heard from local residents, the parish council and ward members when they vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Vickers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. A lot of what I was going to say has already been said, so I won't repeat it. It's quite clear that this was an intentional unauthorised development by the applicant. I'm sure they knew what they were doing. It undermines the planning confidence in the planning system when an enforcement notice has been served and has been upheld at appeal, and then we get another application coming forward. I hear what the officers say. I understand the shortfall in pitches across the district, but I think this is a step too far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
I now invite Councillor Ellis Brown.
Thank you very much. I am troubled by this site. I think it does impact the local amenity. I don't think the landscaping has addressed some of the issues that were raised before, for which it was refused. Fully addresses some of those issues that were raised previously. I fully agree with some of the comments made by Councillor Campbell, so I won't go over those again. But I am concerned that this is having a significant impact on the local amenity of those properties that are close by. And as per previously, I think we need to consider why we would be approving this one where previously we did in fact dismiss this, refuse this, and it went to appeal and it was dismissed. So I think I'm not allowed to vote, but I leave it to the members to listen to the debate, reasoned debate, and make up their own minds. Thank you.
Yes.
No, it's fine. Just briefly, members need to be mindful of why this application was refused last time. So it was not refused on neighbour amenity grounds. It was not refused on highway safety. It was refused because of inadequate information on biodiversity, water neutrality, and it had not been demonstrated that there wasn't an impact on landscape and character of the area. That's a good summary. Yeah, thank you. So we need to be mindful that obviously that's a significant material consideration. Also, just to be aware, just so you've got the facts right, the enforcement notice was dismissed at appeal, but the enforcement notice wasn't against the planning merits. The inspector was just considering whether there was a breach of planning control. So the only matter that has considered the planning merits is the previous refusal, which obviously related to the bigger development with the American barn, etc. So just so you understand the context of decision making. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Clark, you
Yes,
mentioned-
I'd like to propose an alternative motion, which is a motion to refuse this planning application on the grounds that it's not been demonstrated that the development would not result in an adverse visual and landscape impact, causing harm to the semi-rural setting and character of the site. And this is in particular the siting and layout of the development, which is contrary to policies 23, 25 and 33 of the HDPF 2015. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you respond?
Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Clark. My only comment is obviously that is the reason for refusal of the June 2025 application. Obviously, since then, the application has been accompanied by additional landscaping information and has been reduced in scale. So I think we'd have to understand what you feel has not been demonstrated. Are you saying it's harmful, or do you still feel that the impact has not been demonstrated because further information is required? So I think there is a difference there. So I think you may wish to consider your point. Thank you.
I'm sorry, before you respond, I have a point of order. I've been advised that Councillor Clark, as you are the ward member, you are not able to propose an alternative motion. It's not true.
I'm sorry, that is incorrect.
My apologies.
I
retract that.
apologise to the officer, but that is incorrect. I have the right to propose. I do not have a right to vote.
Yeah, Councillor Clark, I was just trying to say that I'm retracting that, and I've heard further clarification that you are allowed to propose that alternative motion. Can you just read back? Could you just read back, just for clarity? Could you read back your proposed alternative motion, please?
Actually, I was going to ask if the officer could repeat what she said.
So I think what is something for you to consider, Councillor Clark, in your motion is the wording that you've put forward is the same, my understanding, we've got the wording here, it's the same as similar to the application that was refused in June 2025. And obviously that started with the wording, it has not been demonstrated. So members need to consider, well, what does that mean? What has not been demonstrated? You know, usually that type of wording is used when you feel that additional information or you know, perhaps would address that concern. Obviously, we do have additional information in this application. It has been amended. So are members still of the view it's not been demonstrated, or are you saying it's harmful? I'm not suggesting you do one or the other, but I think you just need to consider the wording in the context of what your concerns are. Is that helpful, Councillor Clark?
Councillor Clark, would you like 5 minutes to consider this, and we could perhaps take and my apologies. on reflection, we're going to have a short adjournment of 5 minutes. Thank you. Councillor Clark, could you please read your proposed alternative motion?
I have to decipher my handwriting, which is another job. So to turn the proposal down, because the proposed development has a significant adverse impact, and that the proposed mitigation will not address the significant harm to the landscape in this location that is contiguous to the South Downs National Park. This is in line with policies 23, 25, 30 and 33.
Thank you. And
That's correct.
do we have a seconder for this? Councillor Vickers, thank you. So we're going to vote on the alternative motion. I don't remember the quite exact wording, but well, all those in favor of the alternative motion, please show.
On a point of order, Chairman, Councillor Campbell cannot vote.
Yeah, sorry. Any against? And I will abstain.
That is,
So the alternative motion has succeeded and the original motion to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions has failed. Thank you. So the application has been refused.
Okay. Oh.
I think there's a problem to get to the car park in Swan Walk, I think is the issue.
Josh, could you let the members of the public out, please? Thank you very much. Oh, Judy's there as well.
They're not allowed to go to the car park. No, public aren't allowed. Yeah, I know. I don't make the rules, but those are the rules.
Thank you, thank you, Josh. Okay, moving on to DC 25 1473 Swan Walk, Horsham, West Sussex. Please could the officer present this application to committee? Thank you.
Thank you. Members' attention is again drawn to the addendum, which includes updates for this application. The application relates to land on West Street outside the entrance to the Swan Walk Shopping Centre. The site is within a conservation area with listed buildings identified by the blue stars on their site plan. The application seeks planning permission for a wayfinding totem, which would provide information at the sign's base. The scheme has been amended with the input of the council's conservation officer to make it appear a more sculptural piece of public art, with the sighting and form in relation to surrounding buildings shown on the current elevations. We also now have visual impressions of the sign, with this the view along West Street and a closer view looking toward the entrance of Swan Walk. It is considered the amended scheme strikes a balance between providing improved signage while protecting the amenities of the locality, with the design and form of the sign not appearing unduly intrusive or dominant. No adverse impacts have been identified, with the application recommended for approval as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the first speaker, which is Thomas Close, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
My name is Tom Close and I'm speaking on behalf of Horsham Society. We strongly object to the erection of this totem pole at the entrance to Swan Walk.
Because of our campaign against A-boards, West Street enjoys an uncluttered view along its whole length, with the just tasteful poles in keeping with the street architecture for hanging baskets down the centre of the street, and also hanging baskets and Christmas decorations. There are Horsham District Council maps at both ends of West Street and in the Carfax giving directions to Swan Walk Shopping Centre already, as well as other public amenities such as railway station, bus station, library and council offices. If this application was allowed to go ahead, it would spoil this uncluttered view along the West Street, as well as setting a precedent for other private companies to apply for signs directing you to their premises, such as Pyrrhus Place or John Lewis and Waitrose, or even individual shops. If Swan Walk want to advertise the shops available within Swan Walk, we would not object to a list of the shops on the entrance door to Swan Walk or the adjacent wall. To sum up, there is already more than adequate Horsham District Council signage for Swan Walk, and this overlarge totem pole would spoil the uncluttered view down West Street, as well as setting a precedent for other applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Blake Lee, please. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, I'm Blake Lee from Dara Planning, the agent for the application, speaking on behalf of the client and in support of the application. The officer's report concludes that the proposal is a fixed wayfinding feature intended to improve pedestrian orientation, enhance legibility, and strengthen connectivity between West Street, Swan Walk, and the wider town centre. It is therefore considered acceptable in principle in this town centre location. The report also addresses the objections from Dean Neighbourhood Council. Officers do not consider the proposal comparable to an A-board because it is a permanent, purpose-designed wayfinding structure to assist navigation rather than a temporary advertisement for an individual business. Importantly, the design was amended during the application process, including revisions to the lower projections to address safety concerns. The report concludes that there are no highway safety objections, no unacceptable amenity impacts, and no harm to the character or appearance of the conservation area. The conservation officer raises no objection to the amended scheme. The recommendation before members is approval, subject to conditions, including controls over illumination and materials. On the basis of the officer's assessment, I respectfully ask the committees to support these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Trudy Mitchell of Den Neighbourhood Council, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Horsham District Council has a responsibility for the public realm and an expressed intention to declutter its retail centre of unnecessary street furniture and signage. Schemes have always aimed to keep a clear view along the length of West Street to encourage shoppers to explore all its attractions. West Street is very narrow for a major shopping thoroughfare, and the crossing point between the Forum and Swan Walk is the busiest part of the street, so unrestricted movement is essential. The junction is already congested by outdoor seating for cafes. However, these do bring financial benefit to the whole street. Swan Walk has a clearly defined large archway entrance, so an adjacent wayfinding totem in the centre of the street is superfluous. The amended structure with the swan design is now promoted as a work of art. It is attractive in itself, but totally unsuitable in this location. The enormous size of the installation is not apparent from either the scenes we just saw on the screen or from the committee report. The structure is 1.43 metres wide, nearly 5 feet, and it is a massive 4.91 metres high, over 16 feet. This will dominate the centre of the street and completely block the view. It is astonishing that the Conservation Officer's report seems oblivious to the Council's attempt to declutter West Street. In the past, this has included removing street-level planters and even hanging baskets from the lampposts in order to preserve a safe route and maintain a clear view. There has been a constant battle to make West Street safer for all pedestrians, but especially for the visually and mobility impaired. This includes trying to deter illegal cyclists and the introduction of the A-board policy. This policy was actually initiated by Den Neighbourhood Council. It restricts the number of advertising boards and includes height restrictions, thus eliminating the use of unsightly flag banners. Moreover, by insisting that advertising boards are within 1 metre of premises, the policy ensures the centre of the street is kept free of obstructions. This planning application constantly refers to wayfinding, but in our opinion, it is a blatant form of advertising with a large notice board below the swan. There is no mention that a second planning application, DC 251474, was submitted at the same time for the same structure, but this was specifically designated as advertising when validated. The applicant's intention is obviously to advertise the Swan Walk businesses, and this is unacceptable. The application contravenes the Council's A-board policy, firstly in that it promotes individual businesses away from their premises, and secondly in creating an obstruction away from the 1 metre boundary of a business. We are also still not sure about the safety of the structure. We do not know if the circular base of the structure is flush with the pavement or if it could cause a trip hazard. The original application referred to a freestanding structure, which given its size is somewhat alarming. We assume that it will require some form of fixing or foundation, which may cause damage to the pattern of the street surface. The committee report 6.2 quotes the Blueprint Neighbourhood Plan Policy, HB7, which supports suitable advertising. However, this current application is totally unsuitable for the reasons we have stated. We are also extremely concerned that ignoring the requirement to keep the street view free of obstructions will provide a precedent for other advertising applications in West Street, such as that already submitted for a very large and illuminated BT hub. We trust you will appreciate the need to preserve the character of West Street and will refuse the application for this huge and dominating structure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just to pick up on a few points, we had a comment about setting a precedent for future similar installations along West Street. Just to obviously remind members that all applications are considered on their own merits. In this case, future signage along West Street would need potentially planning permission and or advertisement consent. So there is a mechanism to provide control to prevent future proliferation where it would be harmful. In terms of the separation around the sign, there's a minimum of 3.6 metres clearance either side, which is sufficient for servicing vehicles and pedestrian movement. And in terms of the A-board policy, that's considered at paragraph 6.5 of the report. And the point there really is that this isn't an A-board, so that policy wouldn't automatically apply to the consideration of this application. So we've approached it as a judgment as to whether the visual impact of this installation is acceptable or not. And the view of officers is that it's of a design and sighting which provides some visual interest without dominating the street. But as I say, that is a judgment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member wishing to comment on this application? Councillor Knoll, yes.
I'm not sure.
Need the microphone, Councillor.
I'm terribly sorry, Chairman. I'm not sure from these dimensions behind me how thick the structure is going to be, i.e. the...
Dimensions, yes. You've got the height and the width.
So the width.
But you haven't got how thick it is.
Yeah, so, yeah,
14330. No, that's the base.
so I still don't understand it from looking at those.
150 it says on that.
150? 150 what, centimetres?
Do you mean the thickness of the sign or the?
Yeah, if you're looking along West Street.
Where Councillor Lambert is, yeah. Okay.
150 centimetres apparently, thank you. Yeah, what's in inches?
The bottom.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out.
150 and then. Yes. Yeah.
So the obstruction looking down West Street will be like a pole in the middle of the street.
It's the swan outline which is fronting up and down the street.
That way.
So
it's that way.
Yeah.
It's not thin. Okay. Okay.
That's pretty.
Thank you.
Councillor Blackburn.
Sorry if officers have mentioned this, but what is it proposed to be made of?
Sorry, it doesn't work on my phone.
The actual material.
Does any other member have a question whilst we're coming to you? Councillor Croker, yes.
Thank you, Chair.
I will come back to you, Councillor Blackburn.
Just looking at the applicant's design statement, there appears to be a rather large green box quite close to where this is proposed to be sited. Presumably that is our friends at BT and they probably didn't need planning permission for it. Am I correct?
Hold that for a moment there, Councillor Croker.
So the planning statement doesn't specify the actual material, just the finish, which is specified as a brass colour, with the darker sort of plumage, I suppose, a charred black timber finish.
Just to add though, obviously, you know, at present it's in accordance with the details submitted, but obviously if that required further consideration, then we can have further details submitted by condition rather than approving it as per the details we already have. Thank you.
And the question from Councillor Croker there regards to the BT.
Our understanding is it was under permitted development, Councillor Croker.
I'm sorry, could you say again, please?
Our understanding is it was erected under permitted development, the box, as you can see on the photograph.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members? Me? Oh, yes, sorry, Councillor Trollope.
Okay, thank you. Just two questions, quite distinct. One, can the officers confirm, and my apologies if it's in the report, but I don't remember seeing it. Do we have assurance that this won't impede the access of any emergency vehicles? And then the second question is, which is completely different, is the signage, the actual list of the shops. Is that with the store's logos, or is it just a neutral listing of the shops?
You can kind of see on this montage the kind of bronze lettering. It's shown as a list of shops rather than logos. In terms of the separation, there's a minimum of 3.6 meters around either side of the sign, which is enough for vehicle movements up and down the street.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Noel.
Thank you, Chairman. I assume that these shop names are going to be removable and changeable, because the way the retail business is going at the moment, they won't be there for very long.
We would expect so, Councillor Noel, that they're added in such a way that you can just take them off and put a new one in. That would be sensible, wouldn't it?
Councillor Livingston, yes.
Are we allowed to comment on its artistic merit? Because I don't think it has much from my personal point of view. I think it's an enormous swan stuck in the middle of the street. All it needs is a small console, if anything. I think it'll be vandalised pretty quickly anyway. So it might, which I'm sure it'll end up with road cones on the top. I think it's an unnecessary obelisk in the middle of a lovely town centre. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just briefly, that it's not a matter of whether you like it or not. It's a matter of, well, you have to consider its acceptability or not in the context of planning policy. And obviously, if you consider it as unacceptable, why? How can you demonstrate that harm? What policy have you got that backs that up? It's not a matter of whether you like a swan or not. Obviously, the scheme has evolved. Have you got the original one on the slides?
No.
No, okay. It was a big, massive pole to begin with. So it has evolved. And obviously we have comments from our conservation officer. So I think we just need to consider it in the context of its impact rather than whether we like a swan. Thank you.
Okay, any final comments? Councillor Franklin, yes.
Yeah, just perhaps to be absolutely crystal clear then, we are approving not only the installation of a sign, but this specific one in this design.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, I'm now going to go to the vote, and the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. All those in favour, please show. Okay. All those against? Any abstentions?
For the application 7, against the application 3, and 2 abstentions.
Therefore, the application, the recommendation to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions has been approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to Item number 7, any urgent business? I don't have any urgent business. So finally, I'd like to thank the officers for their presentations and guidance this evening, and members for your involvement and contribution. There will be a short break until the next meeting, and we shall reconvene at 7:35. So at 7:25, I bring this meeting of the Planning Committee to a close. Thank you very much.